Today on Mic Attempts, fan mounting bracket. I bought the quiet version of this 24-inch fan in hopes of reducing the background noise in my videos. I'm still undecided if it was worth the cost, but when I found the same motor for an unbeatable price, I couldn't pass it up. I figured I'd make my own mounting bracket and order the blade and guard from the manufacturer. However, after reaching out to them, they said the parts were unavailable and they didn't have any interchangeable parts that would fit. So I ordered the cheapest 24-inch blade and guard I could find from 2 different brands, determined to make it all work. Let's get to it. I'm going to make the mounting bracket from this old piece of steel that was part of my tractor's front end loader. I already scribed a cut line, but first I have to remove some loops. If you watched my angle grinder repair video, you'll recognize number 3. This is actually the first time I've put one of these Makita grinders to work, and it's performing great. I cleaned up the edges with a flat disc, and then took it over to the press brake. This steel is 3/16 thick, and at this angle almost takes up the whole press brake. I felt like it might be maxing out my press, but I was able to make the bend. Now for the top. This was the biggest piece of metal I've tried bending, and it did a nice job. Next, I needed to duplicate the details on the tip. I used a piece of cardboard to trace the curve and mark the holes. I'm gonna have to grind off the rest of this loop. Done. I cut the curve on the bandsaw, and cleaned it up on the bench grinder. I marked the holes with a punch and drilled them out. The steel wasn't wide enough to accommodate the bend I'd need on the back, and even if it was, I wouldn't have been able to do it in my press brake because of the other bends. So I decided to make that part out of angle iron. I drilled the holes for mounting the bracket on the wall. And then tacked it in place. The outside edge went fairly smooth. I prettied it up with a flap disc. I was having a hard time getting a good tie-in between the 2 pieces on the inside edge. The weld was mostly just sticking to the angle iron. I switched to 70-18 electrodes and eventually figured out a better rod angle to get a good weld. Then I cleaned it up with the needle scaler and angle grinder. I removed most of the old paint. I've got my leather man apron on to protect my soft bits from the steel wire projectiles. The inside weld looks a little rough, but it adds character. I gave it a new paint job. Doesn't look too bad. Here they are side by side. The dimensions aren't exact, but that doesn't matter. I chose to mount the original fan on my homemade bracket in a different area of the workshop. I'm happy with how it turned out. With everything back together, it's working good. I mounted the other motor to the original bracket in my garage. The guard mounting holes almost line up with the bolts on the front. I thought about welding a ring on the guard so it could be mounted like the original, but I opted for a simpler solution. I clipped off the tips and screwed it on. The set screw on the new blade is only making contact with the edge of the shaft, so I drilled and tapped a new hole. It wasn't perfect, so I used them both. Now I've got a second fan for about 1/3 the cost. Feel free to rate this video, add your comments and questions below, and subscribe for more.